Oh, there's no Jedis in this one. Never mind. The Mandalorian, first episode of it, at any rate. I make no promises of keeping up with episode-by-episode reviews of this thing. I really don't do episode-by-episode reviews for anything other than Doctor Who anymore, and it's a pain in the butt for me to have to operate on the release schedule of a show rather than get to work the schedule as I have to set it, so no promises on that. If I stick with it, I will probably give a wrap-up once the season's done airing. But for now, this is just my impression and my feelings on the first episode. And they are a bit mixed. I will say this, there's nothing that I find to be a glaring issue. There's no fundamental, oh God, this. Like some of the problems that I had with The Last Jedi, and nor does it feel quite as overly workshopped to death the way that Solo did. That said, it does have some of the flavor of some of the issues I had with Solo, but I'll be coming back to that. So, in case you haven't watched this yet, seems like everyone already got Disney Plus, so what do I know? But in case you haven't, the Mandalorian in question, we do not know the identity of. The implication is we will never know the identity of. It is not Boba Fett. It is some other Mandalorian. It's said early on, is it true that you never take off your helmets? And the few times that it's even proposed, it's made clear, yeah, he's not going to do that. So it does seem very clear, at least to be setting up, that we're never going to see this face. So, the setup for Not Boba Fett, the series, is that he's a bounty hunter. Hey, just like that other guy who's dead and this isn't him. Yeah, I'll stop harping on that. I actually don't really care all that much. I always thought Boba Fett looked cool, but I never really cared about him all that much either. I didn't even really know that was his name when I was watching the series as a kid, the original films, because Han only says it offhandedly in the third film, and in the second one he's just the bounty hunter. Anyway, I'm tangenting already. So we have a Mandalorian. He's a bounty hunter. We get to see him on the job doing his thing. It is established that this is set between Return of the Jedi and presumably before we get to Force Awakens, because he states early on the Empire is no more, but there's no mention of the First Order or anything like that. So one would assume that we're kind of in the lull in between the end of the Empire and the rise of the First Order. So that's where we appear to be timeline-wise. We jump around to a couple of planets. He gets hired for a bounty that is it's a special job. It's being done a little bit outside of the normal means. The pay is very high. And yeah, we get to see him go about what he needs to do in order to get there, find out what the bounty is, and then once we see what the bounty is, that's basically our setup for what I presume is going to be the rest of the series. So I am going to start getting into spoilers a little bit later, but I'm going to end up... Normally I try and save my complaints for later on, but a lot of the complaints I'm going to make aren't really spoilers. Or if they are, they're spoilers for like tiny things that aren't plot relevant. So there's a lot of little things about this that just annoy me. And this is me fully copying to the fact that none of this, the stuff I am about to complain about, none of it matters. None of it impacts the plot. I might be the only one who cares. This is pedantic and nitpicky and dumb. But it all still bugs me, so I'm going to mention it. So when I talked about the trailer for this thing before, I did mention it irked me that the Mandalorian is using carbonite basically for everybody. And that bugged me because in Empire Strikes Back, it was made clear that the carbonite freeze is not meant for human transport, and it's super dangerous. But given that this is set later on, I'd be willing to buy that they have fine-tuned it so that it works as standard bounty hunter procedure. Enough times passed, and it worked that first time. Sure, Cool. So I'll let that one go. But there are a lot of other little things that just kind of annoy me. And again, there's nothing wrong with them, but they just irk me. So the first planet we start out on, it's an ice planet. I don't think it ever gets named. And there's a speeder on it. Like the kind that were on Tatooine. And that immediately bugged me. Now, there's no reason that there can't be a speeder there, but in my head, I had always kind of assumed and thought, and it didn't even occur to me that I assumed this until I saw that speeder on this planet, on this ice planet, and go, that's a Tatooine speeder. What is that doing there? And realize that this is an assumption I've always had, that the technology is regional. That that different planets are going to build the technology that they need to get by in their environment. And that because Star Wars has always had that very cobbled together feel, I guess with the exception of some of the prequels, because that was, in the Republic when it was all nicer and shiny. But the Star Wars that I love, and that this is very much trying to evoke, has always had that very cobbled together feel. So the idea that speeders are some sort of standard transport that exists on multiple planets, that bothered me. Like right off the bat, I'm like, no. Like it could be the same principle, but it shouldn't look like the same model that Luke had on Tatooine. And yes, you could say, well, obviously it's like it's a beat up thing and it could have come from anywhere. But yeah, but who would have moved that off world from one place to another? And that brings me to my original case. Why is it so specifically that thing in both places? Again, there could be a reason. Maybe there's a big interstellar Ford company, for lack of a better term, that just pumps these things out and sells them all over the place. I could buy that. That's totally feasible. But for me, it's annoying because it starts to make the planets interchangeable. They start to lose some of their unique flavor when the technology and what goes on there doesn't feel as unique to that location. And this is actually kind of starting to become an issue in general. I mean, Jakku felt an awful lot like Tatooine, even beyond the fact that they were both desert planets. And that's starting to bother me because I really wish that there was less standardization. And I don't think that's impossible to do. I mean, just look at the Mandalorian ship. It's not Slave One, but it's somewhat evocative of Slave One. So why can't you have a land speeder that is not the Tatooine speeder, but is somewhat evocative of it? I'm spending too much time on this. Let's get on to my other nitpicks, which I'm sure I'll also spend too much time on. There was a lot of, hey, remember this moments. Now, to the show's credit, it doesn't linger on them and it doesn't stop the story to have them, but it does have a fairly large number of them. And again, it made instances where what it was calling back to now feels less unique than it did before. So for example, we see, I don't know what the species is, but whatever Salacious Crumb, the little cackling pet that Jabba has in Return of the Jedi, we see one of those in a cage. And that threw me off because I accept Salacious Crumb wasn't truly unique. There had to be others of that species. But the idea that it's a standard pet as opposed to this weird thing that really only Jabba has, and no one else would ever have this thing in their home. That was, again, it's an assumption that I made that I didn't realize I made until I saw this thing caged, and I'm like, somebody just gonna buy it? Is somebody just gonna have this little thing in the corner in a cage of their home going, oh! I'm like, what is that? Or this one really annoyed me. Just like in Jabba's palace, and this might actually have been on Tatooine. Again, I don't think they named the planet. So I'll accept that it's possible to have it repeated, but they have the ball on the stick come out, to basically interrogate somebody before they open the door. It's fine that they have that, because again, I'm pretty sure it was Tatooine, so same technology, same planet, cool. But it's dialogue, and boy, this proves how much I watch the original Star Wars films way too much. But the things that it says are identical to lines that the one at Jabba's palace said. And that also annoys me because one of the nice things about the droids and the technology in Star Wars as a universe is that they have personalities. And by having this thing say the exact same lines, which I'm sure was done simply just to make it, oh, the fans will be really happy when they recognize these lines. And maybe some fans are or were. I'm annoyed because now I'm suddenly going, oh, that thing didn't have like a cool, somewhat antagonistic personality at Jabba's palace like I thought I did. It's standard programmed responses. Oh, that thing's less interesting now. And, you know, there are a few other things like that, small things like that, that are kind of dotted across this that bugged me. But to start to get into some other stuff, including some stuff that I liked and what my thought is about once we actually get to the proper setup of where this thing is going to go, that requires getting into spoilers. So that's your warning. Okay. So first off, we get sort of the final assault with the Mandalorian going to this compound to get his bounty head. And we run into, I don't know if it is actually IG-88. It could just be a droid of the same model. But I'm prepared to roll with that because this sort of bounty droid would appear just about anywhere. Even if it isn't exactly IG-88 and it is only the same model, that makes sense because bounty hunters jump all over the place. So unlike, say, the land speeder, that didn't bother me so much. And it was very cool to see how that thing operated. It's a badass. Seriously, that thing was not messing around. And so that was very cool. I just like that Werner Herzog is in this. Like, what? I remember spotting him in the trailer going, wait a minute, what? Huh? And, yeah, that was cool to see. I dug it. So, I like that. The acting's good. This whole thing looks good. It is a good-looking show. Now, when we get to the end, and what the Mandalorian finds that he was sent to terminate, is basically a baby Yoda. And I have slightly mixed feelings about that specifically, but then that gets to what it looks like it's setting up for the thing overall. So that specifically, it feels like they're trying to get us invested because it's a baby version of a character we already love, and that just seems like a very cheap way to tug at the heartstrings. I'm fine with the fact that it's like an infant. I kind of wish that it wasn't necessarily something, again, that feels very cynically designed to tug at the existing fan heartstrings. Just like it felt very cynical, you know, the callbacks to the Carbonite and Salacious Crumb and the Land Speeder and all the other stuff I mentioned that annoyed me. That being said, this basically sets us up for a lone wolf and cub situation where the bounty hunter, not meaning to, but because he has just a little too much of his conscience for his own good, is now responsible to protect this little thing against all the things that are out there to kill it. And that's a solid enough setup. And it's the kind of story that I think the Star Wars universe supports very well. I've been somewhat irritated with the films, or what little of the extra material I've read, because I feel like they really need to expand out what Star Wars stories can be, or at least what stories set in the Star Wars universe can be, because they keep coming back to Jedi and smugglers, and it's the same handful of things. Now, granted, bounty hunters aren't exactly new. This isn't like a really truly carving a new path, but setting up this kind of story, this sort of Ronin story, that's different. That's a little new. I can dig it, especially if we're going to lean into the more sort of Wild West vibe that settings like Tatooine and Jakku have, which is a great setting for that kind of story. So as much as I have nitpicked this thing, and that stuff really does bug me, again, disproportionately so, I'm sure, but it does, And I'm pretty sure if I continue to watch this, and I'll stick with it for at least a few more episodes, and if I continue to watch it, that stuff is going to continue to bother me. But it's well paced, it's well acted, it's well shot, action's good, solid setup for a series. Yeah, I'll stick around for at least a bit. So, I don't love it. I'm not blown away by it. As is typical of me, I have notes, but yeah, okay. The Mandalorian, first episode. You've seen it. What'd you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Bunch of stuff to do down there as well. Like, subscribe, support me on Patreon if you are able to do so. That is an immense help. Failing that, you can always share the video. That's a big help for me as well. Plus, there's other links to other stuff down there besides. Click on stuff. It'll take you places. Or, don't. You don't have to. End of the day, folks, you're the council. I'm just running the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned.